good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
Sheriff, you're not cheating on your wife if you eat my lemon square.
Your lemon squares taste like ass.
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking internet horror games. We're talking Poe, the stuffed lemur. And we're talking screaming during a dance number. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace. And we're talking, I am a marshmallow, so hot I'm melting. That's the musical number that you scream during.
Something about the winter. Yeah.
A lot of stuff going on, everyone. And we are discussing a very new film, which is uncommon for the main feed, but it is Jane Schoenbrun's We're All Going to the World's Fair, which, boy, this is a movie.
Yeah, it's a sort of found footage screen life film, which is also something we don't traditionally do. This is only the third one we've ever really covered. And also, Trace, let's not bury the lead. We are talking about a non-binary trans filmmaker.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you reached out to me today and you were like, have we ever covered a film with a trans filmmaker? And I don't think we have, although listeners, y'all might know better than us, so if we're missing it, just ping us.
Sometimes we go into a fugue state. We've done a lot of recordings over the couple of years.
I used to be so good at remembering this shit, and now like 3+ years in, I'm like, nope, I'm out. I can't remember what we did yesterday.
This is true.
But you know what? Maybe we can have someone come in to help us remember things, or I don't know, just give us a good swift kick in the ass. So we do have a guest on tonight's episode, everyone. So she is the editor-in-chief of Dread Central and the co-host of both the Scarred for Life and Watched Once, Never Again podcasts. You may also recognize her voice from our previous episode on the Vampire Lovers. Please welcome Mary Beth McAndrews.
Woo!
I'm so excited to be here and to talk about this movie.
Ah, yes. Okay, Joe, you saw this during the festival circuit, didn't you?
I did. I saw this at Sundance in 2021. Mary Beth, I think you also saw it then, if I'm not mistaken.
Did.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I realized as soon as we were considering programming this that you were the person I had to invite on here.
I'm so excited.
Well, so yeah, that's what I was gonna say, because y'all like plotted behind my back. Y'all were like, okay, we're gonna do this film, we're getting Mary Beth on, blah 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 blah. Trace doesn't know.
More or less.
Surprise!
Yes.
Well, so this is Sundance last year, right? So 2021.
Yeah.
Yes.
God, it's hard to believe it's been so. Y'all must like this movie a lot if it kind of stuck with you this much.
I would say that this really caused a fuss at the festival, which was interesting because Schoenbrun's not a first-time filmmaker. She's actually had her hands in a lot of different kinds of web things, so she's not new to the industry or anything, but I felt like this film wasn't really on a lot of people's radars. I think, Mary Beth, it was probably on yours and mine because it was represented by Kayla here, who is she's one of our favorite press people, so she was actively this is a film you don't want to miss. It's indie, it's small, but you should have it on your radar. And then when it debuted, I remember a lot of people got really into it. So it caused a good buzz.
That's interesting. The reviews for it have been very, very positive. When I go on Letterboxd and I'm looking at what people are thinking, yes, the majority are positive, but I'm interested to see what happens with this film now that it's been released. Because of course, I'm sure y'all are unsurprised to hear, I've seen one of the most boring films I've ever seen, or hyperbolic reactions like, my husband may divorce me for making him watch this.
Oh my God.
Well, good. You don't deserve him anyway.
I was like, girl, you have bigger problems if this movie's going to cause a divorce, so. But this isn't what I would call a super, accessible is a bad word for it, but it's a bit challenging because it is challenging you as a viewer.
Yeah, and also, it's so specifically about a moment in time that I think is for a younger audience. You know what I mean? Because, this movie is so specifically targeted at, me as a person who grew up on MySpace and message boards and chat rooms, and, I used it as like an escape from my life when for multiple reasons. And so this movie just fucking hits home, and I don't know if it's going to resonate for a lot of audiences. It's a very specific tone that I don't know if it's gonna work for everybody.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I watched this twice, and I found myself connecting with it more in a second viewing, but I wasn't really a message board person. I did do chat rooms, so I did like AIM stuff a lot, but I'm very much about the immediate gratification, so message boards never appealed to me because I hated that you had to wait for replies. Mm-hmm. But there's such a sense of loneliness throughout this movie that I think that a lot of queer people can relate to.
Well, and I think also it's the idea of like living your life performatively online, right?
Yes.
Like, I think I definitely agree with you, Mary Beth, that this is something that is going to resonate more for people who grew up in a certain time or who were engaged in certain kinds of online activities. But like, as a person who is older than that and who did not engage with those kinds of things, it definitely got me reflecting about, okay, how do you present yourself online, and how do you curate things, and how do you engage with people, and how do they think they know you? So I think this is going to work for people who are, you know, kind of always online as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting though. I mean, because I know why people obviously present differently online, because it's just, I mean, like, it's that anonymous aspect. But
You never catfished a boy before in a chat room?
No.
Oops.
I feel like I just said this recently on an episode, Joe, but I used to always go to this gay chat room called 123 Gay Teen Chat when I was like 15, 16, 17. And, like, you know, talk to other queer people, or gay, what I thought were gay boys, and did a lot of dirty things with them online through the chat. But I'm fairly certain 50% of the people in that chat room were pedophiles. Like, in hindsight.
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%.
But would y'all say that y'all today, do you think that the image you put out online is true to who you are as a person?
I want to say yes, but, like, I know that's not true. I don't share. I mean, like,
only you can answer that question.
Well, no, but it's true. I think I'm online a lot, but I joke. I'm funnier online, and I think I'm a little bit more positive online than I am in real life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I definitely think I portray myself as a much happier person on the internet. That's fucked up, but it's true.
Well, that's fair, because I mean, I know one of the things that I sometimes struggle with is when I see people who are always unhappy online. I'm just kind of like, oh, this person, like, it makes me think, okay, maybe you need to speak to someone in real life, or like, you know, like, I worry that people pour too much of themselves onto public places just because not like, oh, you're negatively seeking attention, but just like, oh, I think you're better served getting help from people who are going to be looking out for you, as opposed to just like random strangers on the internet.
Well, but you see, though, I mean, I agree and disagree, because that's where the anonymity of the internet, or I guess the unknown of the internet, comes in, because there are people I know who I see them, like, I'm like, you are so different in person, you're so much happier in person, because you're always such a miserable, dour person on Twitter. But how do you know if someone's doing it for attention, or if they're really genuinely hurting, you know, or if it's a combination of both? And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong to either one. It's all kind of a personal taste. But I find it very fascinating. And I don't know, maybe this is unfair, but I even get annoyed when people don't have, like, when they don't have any pictures of themselves on their profile. Like, I know there's a reason for that, because, you know, whatever job you have, or maybe it's a safety issue. But at the same time, I inherently think you're hiding something, you know?
Yeah, like there's trust issues, and I mean, we definitely see that in this film.
Yes.
Like, JLB, why are you using a sketch avatar? Literally, it's a sketch. It's not like, oh, it's a sketchy avatar. It is that as well, though.
And it's a horrifyingly scary sketch.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah, that's that meme that went around for a long time, too. Do you guys remember that meme that went around with that creepy ass face? Ugh, I hate that.
I don't know. No. I don't know that.
Yeah, it was like a creepypasta thing that went around for a while. That was like one of those images that would like pop up and shit everywhere, and you were like on like Reddit, no sleep, and like 4chan and stuff.
That's why I never. Okay, I mean, I know what creepypasta is now, but like when creepypasta was like really becoming a thing, I'd never heard of it. Had no idea what it was. I don't think I even heard of creepypasta until one of the Slender Man movies came out a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah, my brother and I were obsessed with it, like Jeff the Killer and all that crazy shit. That's like so fucked up, and like why were we reading that in like in high school? But
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, Mary Beth, maybe you can just give us like a quick 411, because technically this film plays like a creepypasta, but I'm sure there's people like Trace who don't entirely know what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So creepypasta is basically like digital folklore. So it's all about creepy things like Slender Man, the Rake, who originate on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the time, these creepypasta basically is the story, but a lot of the time they become these fixtures that people think are real. So like Slender Man was born out of a photoshopped photo for a contest, and all of a sudden it like became this huge sensation that people thought were real and everything. So scary stories that basically kind of take on the life of their own in terms of legend. It's kind of like the way we kind of like share legends and stuff like that now. Like that's our kind of version of those kinds of things.
Well, and that is kind of the centerpiece of We're All Going to the World's Fair, right? And it's interesting because the director wasn't involved with creepypasta because she predated that in terms of when she was online and stuff. But it's kind of fascinating how that works into here. All right, everyone. Well, so normally, as you all know, our episodes follow a certain structure. You know, we'll banter like we just did, and then go through some production, reception, and things like that, and then go through the plot. Because this is a bit unorthodox for us for covering a film that just came out a couple weeks ago, and if you haven't seen it, it is on on-demand services now, so you can go stream it in the safety of your own home. We're going to jump right into this plot, and we're going to just have at it.
Yeah, and we've got some director statements that Trace is going to bring in from Schoenbrun as we go to kind of offer some context. And then, of course, we're also going to be doing our own readings like we normally would.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, you know, this is a film where I'm like, I don't think a lot happens like action-y, right? But I feel like there's a lot of depth in the material here that's really going to be fun to, well, maybe not fun, but interesting to unpack.
We are going to get into it, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we open with a long take. There's a lot of long takes in this movie because, of course, like a lot of fan footage, the premise is that we are watching someone who has a fixed camera and they're recording themselves. So we open with this long take of teenager Casey, who is played by Anna Cobb, and she is announcing to her channel's subscribers that she plans to take the World's Fair Challenge. And this is a internet horror game that involves kind of like what Mary Beth was saying about creepypastas. It's like it has an urban legend sort of feel to it. So the structure that you would use is you begin by saying, I want to go to the World's Fair 3 times, and then you are supposed to draw blood and either show it to the camera or wipe it on your screen, and then you would watch some kind of strobe light video that has a very pulsing soundtrack. We don't actually get to see what it looks like, but we watch Casey watch it, and then at the end of it, she says, okay, that was the challenge, and I will update you if I notice any changes.
And this not being able to see what's going on thing will really be consistent throughout the movie. And I think for some people that's going to be a bit underwhelming or even anticlimactic, but that's also kind of the point of the film.
Yeah, this shit ain't The Ring.
No.
Yeah, well, and like it's very much second screen. Like you're looking at her through the webcam perspective. Like you are her looking at herself. It's weird. Like you are a reflection of her. I'm getting too esoteric. Sorry. Anyway, but
No.
Like, do it.
That is so vital, Mary Beth, because that was the thing I realized on the second watch is it's like, oh, we are like one of her channel's subscribers, or we are like JLB, but also then we are also actively watching a movie. Like we are the audience for a horror film. And
yeah.
I know that this is a central premise of things like fan footage and second screen films, but it feels different here.
Well, there isn't like a lot of this, like a lot of second screen, like with Unfriended and The Den, like there's a lot of graphics happening, and this one is much more, this one's clean.
Yeah.
You don't see her like in a YouTube interface. You just have her in the screen, and it feels much more intimate and much more not like we're watching her on YouTube, but more like we are watching her, like literally we are the voyeurs through her camera. Not, it's like more intimate than like a person watching her YouTube, but like we are the reflection back at herself because she can see herself recording. So it's like this really intimate relationship that you don't get in a lot of movies like that.
Well, and it does feel, I mean, I love both Unfriended movies, and I love, like, all these Screen Life
films.
films.
Oh, yes, I do, too.
but at the same time, it's like, I mean, not that it's gimmicky to, like, oh, look, let's have Skype in here, let's have Facebook in here, let's have Twitter in here, or AIM, or, oh my god, not AIM, but, like, whatever messaging system people use.
You would fuck a name.
Yeah, but I like that, yeah, it's that kind of reverse screen life where we do get to see some computer screens here, but it feels, it's less jarring. It pulls me out of the film less. Like, yes, I feel very much like a part of this girl's room.
Mm-hmm. Well, to me, this feels more true to life. Like, it feels more authentic because it doesn't feel like it's been juiced up in post by, like, talented filmmakers who are actually just trying to make it look real. Like, this looks like it could be real in a kind of stripped down, just very, like, yeah, intimate is the right word, Mary Beth.
Yes.
Well, and, like, it's also a really awesome example of hybrid found footage, kind of like, and that's a new thing that's kind of, I think, ushering in now, because I think a lot of movies are adopting these found footage techniques, but don't want to commit to the full aesthetic. But, like, I am a found footage purist. I sometimes don't like hybrid, but after going to a found footage festival this year, and seeing this movie, I have a better appreciation for that kind of hybrid technique if you do it the right way. Because it can be done terribly.
Wait, just genuine question. Can you give me a hybrid film that didn't work for you?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm trying to think of a movie that, like, isn't, like, random obscure bullshit that I've watched on Amazon Prime.
I mean, can we use Paranormal Activity Next of Kin, which wanted to play with found footage, but then also couldn't commit to it?
But sort of, but, like, I'm thinking more, like, when I say hybrid, I mean movies that are, like, straight up, just, like, straight narrative. So have you seen Evidence with Radha Mitchell?
Oh my god, no, but I love Radha Mitchell.
So, it's rather effective, but, like, it's when you go from, like, the traditional narrative filmmaking techniques to found footage and come back out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not done a ton. It's, like, it's still pretty new, but it can be really clunky in terms of, like, why are you going... In The Deep House, they do this, where it's, like, looks like found footage, but then looks, and you're like, why the hell are we combining these two? Like, it's kind of...
Well, because you're changing your entire visual medium.
Well, exactly. And your perspective is it's jarring, but when there's an effective transition between those things, I think it's incredibly well done, and it is much more appealing to people who maybe don't like the shaky cam, but can kind of take it in smaller doses. And I think this movie is one of those ones that plays with that really well in terms of, like, giving you the best of both worlds in an organic way that doesn't feel like a very, like, intense change in perspective.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Side note, though, I will say, I know I'm in the minority here, but I actually really liked The Deep House and found it very creepy.
Okay, I didn't dislike The Deep House. I think it was creepy. I just think the way they switched in and out of found footage was annoying at the beginning. Didn't
bother me, but I know people hate the characters so much, but I was like, whatever. I'm enjoying watching them get the shit scared out of them, so it's fine.
Yeah. That's cool to watch. It's cool looking, so, I mean...
There we go. Yeah, and sometimes that's a big enough hook where you can overcome shitty characters if the either conceit or the filming style is enough, right?
Yeah, exactly. But your mileage may vary. But anyway, back to World's Fair. Sorry.
Okay. So we get the credits, and there are credits to this movie, and the credits to me signal something really important because we don't get to see too much of what Casey or JLB's lives are like outside of their homes. It's a very interior-minded film for the most part, but these credits take place over a generic suburban landscape. So we're seeing freeways, we're seeing big box stores, we're seeing empty parking lots and fields. So they not only tell us kind of where we're at and like, oh, it's winter, so we know the season, but to me, it really gives off this sense of this is boring. This is homogenous. This is suburban life that we're all really familiar with. So there's nothing out here for us. The excitement is on the internet. The excitement are the connections that you can make through something like the World's Fair Challenge because your regular environment is so fucking boring.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've said it before. I grew up in a suburb of Houston. It wasn't as like small as this, but I grew up in like, there was a suburb next to my suburb that very much looked like this, and it was where my church was when I was growing up, so I was just there a lot. It just kind of immediately pulled me back into that world of like, oh yeah, like, and especially we have Best Buy, KFC, Toys R Us, like your major brands are on display here, and it just, I don't know, it's just a certain feeling that like not living in a city where I was like, ugh, I don't miss that life.
Well, and all the parking lots are empty and the Toys R Us is closed down. Like, it's like everything is like just dilapidated and falling apart. Like, it feels almost like a ghost town.
Yeah. Important to note too, just for the credits, David Lowery, the director of A Ghost Story, the Pete's Dragon remake, and The Green Knight did produce this film. So I'm assuming he saw something very special in this and helped like get this done.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering where I recognized that name. I was like, I know who David Lowry is, but I cannot remember for the life of me.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Okay, so we see Casey walking home in the snow, and then we watch this information video online which labels the World's Fair the internet's scariest horror game. And we see a lot of different kind of reactions. We get a smidget of history about how it kind of came together, but really we're back to Casey almost immediately.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, I love this transition so much because it's the chaotic, annoying voice, creepy voice on the phone, and then it cuts just her in the dark, eating at the dinner table, and it's so indicative of when you're sucked into the world of this world that you're watching and you're enamored with it, but really it's nothing. You think it feels like a spectacle, and then you pull out and it's just a boring thing. And I just think it's a really cool contrast about what it looks like when we're consuming technology and that isolation of it.
Right.
It's so exciting. I'm sucked into my phone watching this video, and then you're like, oh, I'm actually just sitting at my dining room table. It's an average day.
Me and TikTok, fucking sitting on a chair watching it for an hour, enamored with it, and looking up and being I literally just lost an hour of my life in my living room.
God.
It's wild. It's wild.
I do not have TikTok on my phone, and I will never have TikTok on my phone, and that is one of the reasons why.
It's a disaster.
Yeah.
I'm a ruined woman.
Extrapolate that for me to Twitter and Instagram, where I just doom scroll, and suddenly I'm that was an hour. I needed to do something with that hour, and now I'm time poor because of it. Motherfuck.
Well, this film will also speak to why do we go online so much, right? And it's that chemical rush of, what is it, serotonin or dopamine, where it's I need this because it's giving me something. Especially after the 2.5 years of the pandemic we've been in, where it's you're not seeing people in person as much as you used to. Mm-hmm. So you're getting all that, I don't know, the drugs, for lack of a better term, from social media interactions.
All the synapses firing. Yeah.
There you go.
So Casey runs upstairs when she hears someone arriving home. This, we will eventually learn, is her father. We will never see him. We don't know if she has a mother or if the mother just isn't around very much, but I think it's very telling that we never actually see any parents in Casey's life.
Well, so that's what I was going to say. Why do you think that decision was made to never show these people?
Because being on the internet's fucking lonely and you don't want anyone to know what you're doing. And I feel it amplifies that solitude. There is someone there, but the only comfort you find is the internet. And I think showing another person will kind of shatter that illusion of total isolation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's not completely isolated, but her always being in her room, or almost always in her room, creates this bubble that you don't want to penetrate, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is actually fairly common for YA properties. We either have parents who are present and they are overly present and or even getting their own storylines, or they are completely absent. I'm thinking of when we talked about Let the Right One In a couple of weeks ago, which, by the way, traces the conversation that you had about AIM and your pedophiles that you were chatting with.
For the record, I don't know if any of them were pedophiles. I just assumed they were.
Just the default pedophile mode. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. But if we think about the parents in that film, Oscar's mother is barely there. She's not even visually present in Matt Reeves' remake. And this is pretty common, right? It's parents are not involved in these children's lives. You can read it as a social condemnation of how we parent our children nowadays. Or how kids, like you said, Mary Beth, they seek refuge in the internet because they are not connected to people in real life, and most specifically not their parents.
Well, and also, usually in movies like this where the parents aren't around, the kids are, doing drugs and partying and,
right.
Scare quotes, ruining their lives, as adults say. But here it's, I think more of the reality. I have a 19-year-old brother, and, his ass is almost always at home.
Mm-hmm. Just online.
Just online, playing video games, and he wants to be by himself all the time, which I very much identify with, but I feel
But kids today also have technology at a much younger age. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was a sophomore in high school, which then was even early, and I had to share it with my sister who was 2 years younger than me. But you have kids today who have a cell phone in elementary school and an iPad before that.
Exactly.
I mean, I think we've also changed our definition of what community is, right? Like, I mean, one of the benefits of things like social media and even predating that, like internet chat rooms, is the ability to find like-minded people
Right.
that you couldn't find in person, right? So you're able to reach out across the World Wide Web and meet somebody maybe from a far off land. And you know, that's one of the things that this film is exploring, is this subset of people who are excited about a horror game coming together, and whether or not there's positive or negative interactions happening there. Okay, so she resumes watching videos, and we're seeing other people's reactions after they have done the World's Fair Challenge. This ranges across a couple of different spheres. We'll see these people again in different facets. And then all of a sudden, kind of like you said, Mary Beth, it's a time suck. Her dad is pounding on the door because it's 3 o'clock in the fucking morning.
And she's 13, right? Is that how she's supposed to be?
I think so. Yeah, she's
Okay.
13.
I'm seeing like, did I ever say
God,
this at 3 a.m. when I was
fuck.
13?
When I was, God, so this movie unlocked a memory for me, and I'm about to get personal because it's incredible. This
Okay.
unlocked a very weird memory for me. So my dad, his second wife, had very wealthy parents. And I grew up pretty poor, so I had never experienced like wealth, like big wealth. It was like a very foreign concept to me. And so she was very wealthy, and we went to visit her parents, and they had one of those houses where like they had like a fancy sitting room that no one sat in,
Oh, yeah.
and then an actual living room. All of the rooms had like they were like the blue room, the yellow room, like that kind of shit. And so I would always stay in the yellow room, but it freaked me out because there were 2 beds and they were perfectly made, and like I had never been around that shit before. So I would sleep in their computer room that was connected to the yellow room, and I would go on Neopets like chat boards and like meet people, and like I made a whole personality for myself, and I would sit on these chat rooms until like 4 a.m. watching anime like a fucking nerd, and
We own our nerddom. We own our nerddom
and like
here.
writing Harry Potter fan fiction. I know that's like out of vogue now, but back then I wrote Harry Potter fan fiction, met people online that we would like send messages to each other, and like we were not ourselves. Like I was totally a fake person.
Right.
And like met boys online, and it was like that was how I kind of like when I went to their house, when I went like I visited them pretty frequently, and it was like where I felt comfortable because like I had no idea how to interact with these people. And then like this always was kind of the theme when I saw my dad, is I would like make these personas, because my dad and I have a very bad relationship, but like I never really realized how much I used the internet when I was around them to like kind of escape myself. And it was like a weird realization in watching this movie, and how I used the internet and like staying up late to kind of become a person that I felt in control
Wanted to be.
over.
So to
Yeah.
be clear, though, so you didn't remember until watching this movie that you had done that.
Yeah, I knew I like went on Neopets message boards and talked about Harry Potter, but I didn't think about the connection between when I did that and like why I did it. I just thought I was a weird kid, but that's like a little bit deeper than me just being a weird kid.
Joe, did you have an escape? Because for me personally, I mean, that's why I got into movies. Like the fictional worlds to me were like an escape from the bullying that I experienced as a kid. So like I had friends, but I also had bullies, and so I just really got into fiction, TV and movies, just because I was like, I would rather live in those worlds than go to school.
Yeah, my experience wasn't too dissimilar, except that it was mostly books, just by virtue of the age that I was at. Like, I didn't have a TV in my room. I didn't have high-speed internet. And if we did, it was in the living room, like it was a family computer. So I ended up making my room kind of like my safe space where I could just go and retire. And like, my parents weren't allowed to go in there if I wasn't there. So I had like decorated it exactly the way I wanted to feel comfortable. But yeah, I mean, I was a lonely child, even though I had a sister who I absolutely worship. She was 3 years older, and she was like, get the fuck away from me because you're a kid. So I would just hang out in my room and just like read all the time. But I'm sure if it had been like 5 to 10 years later, I would have absolutely just been on the internet the whole time.
It's so funny that you mentioned like not having a TV in your room, because I remember distinctly when I got my first TV in my room. It was one of those big square like block TVs with the built-in VHS player.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god! But child me was ecstatic. I could watch VHSs in my room at bedtime.
Mm-hmm.
I had a laptop and a portable DVD player that I would watch movies in at night.
Ah, perfect.
You had a laptop.
but that's another really fucked up story because my dad and my stepmom bought it for me to win my affection when I was 14. They it was a whole fucked up thing, but they got it for me when I was 14 for my birthday because
How old are you, Mary Beth? I don't think I know this answer.
I'm 28.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay.
Yeah. I'm relatively young.
Well, I was my first computer was that big Windows 98, again, the big block computer.
Well, so I grew up with a family computer like that. I had the family computer for a long time, but my dad did that whole fucked up thing that divorced parents do and bought me one without telling my mom, and my mom was so pissed because she never wanted me to have a laptop because I would always have the computer. Because she was my mom tried so hard to keep TVs out of our rooms and computers out of our rooms, which is a good move on her part. I get it. But then I got the laptop, and then it was all downhill from there.
Well, what's so funny is how we all then grew up to be massive media consumers all the time. It's the thing we do now 24/7.
The whole thing about taking your hobbies and monetizing them.
Oh, God, yeah. Okay, so the next day, Casey trudges into the woods and she's recording herself because she wants to document the symptoms after she has taken the challenge. So, again, this is kind of a long shot to an extreme long shot as she just sits in this hammock. And then we actually get to see the video that she's recording of herself that presumably she would upload later. So she talks a bit about how she's a horror fan and how she used to sleepwalk when she was younger and how she knew what was happening, but she couldn't control herself. And that's how she feels now. And she's almost becoming desensitized. So she acknowledges that even though she's not wearing a jacket or a sweater, it's obviously cold outside, but she says, I don't feel anything. I'm not even cold right now.
Mm-hmm. No, and that really is something that Schoenbrun was trying to get across here. So, we've discussed how she is a trans filmmaker, but she actually started transitioning during production of this film. I don't think it was during filming, but during the genesis of this film. And I pulled a bunch of quotes. So she released a director's statement with the film, but I've also found a couple of interviews, and most of these quotes are going to be pulled from either that director's statement or an interview with Orla Smith for Seventh Row titled Jane Schoenbrun, Once We're All Going to the World's Fair to Scare You and Make You Cry. So Schoenbrun says, the film is an attempt to use the language of cinema to articulate the hard-to-describe feelings of dysphoria. Growing up, I did not know this word, nor did I know the words transgender or non-binary. These terms hardly existed at the time. I believe we're still just beginning to develop a language through which we can articulate our transgender experiences, whether verbally or cinematically. What I did know growing up was a constant feeling of unreality, one cut with an ambient sense of shame, self-loathing, and anger. I knew that fiction was a safe place for me to hide. I think fantasies that were offered to me were appealing because the life I was living and the body I was living did not feel real to me. It took me decades to unravel those feelings and to understand them for what they were, very common symptoms of dysphoria. And this is something, I've never experienced this. And I know that, Joe, you've opened up about your experiences with body dysmorphia, but this is something that I can't personally relate to. So I find that's kind of what I like about this film, is that I feel like I'm getting a window into feeling something that I have never and probably will never experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it reminded me of some stuff that so I was a really weird kid, and I still don't know if it was dysphoria. It's something I'm working on in therapy, actually, because I used to pretend I was a werewolf, a vampire, and a witch. And I know it sounds like weird kid stuff, but I legitimately thought I was my body was transforming, which she was reminded in her director's statement later on. She talks about this. I won't jump ahead with that. But this movie made me think about the weird shit that I did as a kid and I always thought I was just a weirdo. But then in this context of this movie, realizing I think I was disconnected from myself, and I don't consider myself non-binary. So it's not the same exact thing as what Jane is talking about in her film, but it reminded me of that disconnection with my body and using fantasy to find a way to connect better with myself and understand myself.
Yeah.
And again, this movie made me think about that in a way I hadn't before, which was really weird, but in a good way, but in a way that I hadn't ever confronted. I was I was just a weird kid, and I was a weird kid, but there was other stuff going on that I didn't think about.
Well, I guess too, maybe this isn't dysphoria, but Joe, even being gay, thinking you're straight, trying to be straight, but your body and your mind telling you, but you aren't. Like, I guess that's the closest I can come to like relating to this feeling.
I think to me, it feels like we're talking about a bit of a spectrum where we can't relate to Schoenbrun's experience or the trans experience because we don't have that sense of disconnectedness and trying to figure out who you authentically are. And yet we can see part of ourselves in that because especially as you're coming of age and either you're figuring out your sexuality or in Mary Beth's case, you're figuring out you're not a werewolf or a witch. And I'm not even saying that to be funny, Mary Beth, because I know you've talked very authentically about how you were like, no, I was 100% convinced of this. So
I was convinced of it because I wanted to be something different than who I was. You know what I mean? Like it was like
Exactly.
a way for me to like disconnect from my reality and be like, there has to be something better than my current state of living. And so, yeah.
The number of times I sat in my bed and prayed that God would grant me Matilda's powers is a lot.
But all this to say, I think even if we can't exactly relate to Schoenbrun's experience and what she's trying to capture with this film, I think we can get an inkling of it enough that it sort of turns the lens back on us and we say, okay, I'm feeling something and oh shit, it's either unlocking something, might be a memory, it might just be a weird vibe. But that's one of the things I like the most about this movie is how it's actually a very emotive movie. It makes you think a lot about why are you feeling the way you're feeling? And it's all based in the way that these images are constructed.
Well, and Schoenbrun continues. So she says, I was transitioning while making the movie. I'm still fairly early into my transition. At the time of this interview, which is around the Sundance premiere, she was 6 months on HRT.
Okay.
She continues, but I was existing. And I had existed when I was 13 years old on the internet in a state of dysphoria. I think emotionally, our context for what dysphoria is as a culture, and certainly mine before I had put a name to the feelings I was having, was very limited. And certainly limited by a media that had been created primarily by cisgender filmmakers. Mm-hmm. It's sad people looking in the mirror and telling their therapist that they have the soul of a woman, even though they're a man. I don't want to deny that those are real experiences, but for me, dysphoria was just this sort of desire to disappear from myself, to hide in friction, and to just not look inside. I often describe it as very similar to the phenomenon of having an email in your inbox that you don't really want to read and just avoiding it, except that's your entire life.
Oh my God.
See, and that's why I connected really hard with the director's statement because I had never heard dysphoria described like that because I've never been like, I identify with a different gender. I never have. But the way Jane describes it is like, that is very similar to how I went through much of my childhood. Like, what the fuck? I've never thought about it like that. And it like blew my brain apart.
It simplifies the experience. I mean, again, because yes, any kind of feeling like that is going to be very complex and very dependent on the individual themselves, right? Like no one experience is probably going to be exactly the same. But I like that. I mean, again, like I've tried to explain to straight men my entire life. When they're like, how did you know you were gay? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, like,
how did you know you were straight?
Yeah, exactly. Like, why do you like men? I don't know. I don't get hard over women. But like, again, for some people, that's not the same thing because sexuality is also a spectrum.
Right. Or something that we can control.
Exactly. Again, Schoenbrun continues, I'm not sure if I've ever seen dysphoria explored in American film in this way, at least not by an openly trans filmmaker. And I think if I had, it would have helped me a lot. Instead, I saw films like Boys Don't Cry, Dallas Buyers Club, and Silence of the Lambs, and I didn't see myself in those films' depictions of transness at all. As the film critic Willow McClay writes in her series Bloody Talk, transgender cinema, as it is understood by cisgender filmmakers, is exterior forces and changes. What cisgender filmmakers typically do not understand is that for us, the internal becomes external, not the other way around. Dysphoria manifests itself in real exterior ways, but it originates from an internal place. When I started writing the script, if you'd asked me if I was trans, I would have said no. By the time it was done, I would have said yes, but I would have been really scared to tell you that. Now that it's being released, I'm really proud of the fact that the film is speaking from a trans voice in the middle of that process because the film is trying really hard to represent something. Not the characters, because I'm not so interested in thinking about which characters are or aren't trans, but in a feeling I was trying to get across and work out within myself that I couldn't put a name to while I was starting to make the film. That was the thing that drove me to make art in the first place, to explore this thing I couldn't quite put a name to, and that I thought I was the only one who'd experienced it. It was through the movie that I found a name for it. Honestly, the most moving thing about premiering the film is the validation and not feeling that what I was trying to express was mine alone. It's something that once I figured out a name for it, and a name is a symbol of something that's unspeakable, other people have been moved by.
Ugh, I love this director's statement so much.
It really
It's just
opens up
so
layers.
Eloquent and incredible, and like really puts a lot of things in even more into perspective, and it's just really incredible and also to hear her experience with making this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just incredible.
I think, too, what's fascinating is we're talking about a lot of queer cinema, like week in, week out on this podcast in particular. And I know, Mary Beth, you and Terry often end up encountering even just those readings because of what you two are bringing to the table on your podcast. And same with Dax on Wona. But this feels like such a different kind of beast, because usually I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about the secondary character who happens to be trans and doesn't get a love interest and doesn't get to do anything particularly interesting. But yes, queer cinema. Whereas here it's like, oh, this movie is queer not because of, I mean, yes, obviously because it's made by a trans filmmaker, but more so like it's the experience of watching this movie that makes it trans and therefore queer cinema. Like, that's so fucking fascinating.
It's the best! I studied this when I was in my master's program and took queer cinema, and like had my brain open to the concept of queerness as not just like a queer person on screen, but just as a vibe. And it like opened up my brain as a queer person. And it, like, changed my life as a queer person in terms of seeing myself in movies rather than just, like, oh, there's not another bisexual person. But, like, the vibe of queerness and the experience of it told, it's incredible. It's the best feeling.
Well, and the way Schoenbrun filmed this movie, I mean, again, we've already discussed it quite a bit, but it's just, like, it feels very intimate, but also very cold and distant to me. Like, it is a warring feeling watching this movie, which... Again, if this is the closest I can get to like what it feels like to have dysphoria, I do think Schoenbrun like succeeds in that aspect.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and there's like it's also like digital intimacy. You know what I mean? Where like I've never met you guys before, and like we know each other solely through the internet, and I consider you guys friends. And it's such a weird thing of like digital intimacy. It's like I feel like I know you guys, but also we've never met in person. So it's like this weird disconnect between who you are online. Again, this is coming back to that. And who you are in person, and somehow Schoenbrun really strikes that really well through the way she shoots and like the visual language she creates. It's like so impressive in that kind of visual language and how she's able to capture that, and through this almost first person perspective on one character.
And I will have more to say. I'm sorry, Schoenbrun will have more to say about that. But I think I'll wait until we get to some of like the videos that we'll watch later.
Yes, and also because, of course, we are going to be coming up on our other main character in the film in just a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, so let's return to the film. The next section finds Casey recording herself sleeping, and we have this... I mean, I love the way that this is shot, where the camera is set up so we're filming her laptop, which is recording her in bed. So it's like... I tried to find the right language. I couldn't figure out if it was once removed or twice removed. But again, it very much feels like we are invading the intimacy because this is her bedroom of this 13-year-old girl. But we're not watching her sleep. We're watching the computer sleep as though we are spectators of her channel. And
it really, honestly, it made me feel very creepy because we are essentially spying on this 13-year-old girl.
Even though she is willingly turning on the camera because she wants to be seen and be watched. But there's something, like we are invading the privacy of this.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like a predatory gaze because you know that she's 13 and her ability to consent is not there as much with its digital intimacy, and like we are the creepy voyeur you imagine watching kids online. Like we occupy that subject position, which is so icky.
I did get genuinely get genuine chills from this movie, specifically in the chat we're gonna get in a bit with the new character, but I do worry that people are going to miss out on, like, again, how quote-unquote scary this movie is because they're going to be looking for those traditional scares. But again, just the fact that we are spying on this 13-year-old girl from a seemingly predatory point of view, that is scary to me.
Yeah, like there's no jump scares. There's no people doing scary stuff. Like, it's all just unnerving and uncomfortable. And I don't know about you two, but I felt a sense of mounting dread because I literally never knew where this fucking movie was going to go.
I know.
I agree, and I think we'll have more to say about that, because I think it builds dread very well, but I'm very interested to get to the ending and what y'all think of it.
Oh my god, I have so much to say. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so she ends up getting out of bed, and then she seems to almost get frustrated with herself. Either she can't sleep or she doesn't want to be doing what she's doing. So we follow her out to this shed, which she unlocks. She reveals a hunting rifle, which ominous as fuck, because you're just like, oh, what's she gonna do with a gun? And then she ends up kind of wandering into what I'm calling a man cave, because we see a pool table, we see a big screen TV. It almost seems like a place where her dad would normally be hanging out.
Yeah.
And she ends up watching a YouTube video on the big screen, and it's just this young woman heading the camera and encouraging Casey, and by extension us, to close our eyes and go to bed and have sweet dreams.
This is ASMR, and I fucking hate it. I know people like find it very soothing. I watched this movie twice, and I was cringing through this entire scene both times. I hate the sound of it. It's so annoying and it's so upsetting. I don't know how anyone could find comfort from this. I'm happy if you can.
I like it because it starts calming. Like, I was kind of enjoying it. It did seem soothing to me, and then it just keeps going. And so much of this movie is about long takes. So it's like, get used to it. We're not going to cut away. We're not going to edit to make you feel more comfortable. So even in this case where it's something seemingly nice, it starts to become creepy because we're just lingering on it.
Wait, I'm sorry. That's interesting, though, because this video, people do these. Like, this is meant to be a soothing thing. So and Mary Beth, yeah, what are your thoughts? Because I'm curious. I don't know. If you like ASMR, are you going to react the same way that Joe just did to this?
So, okay. I don't like ASMR, but it's fascinating to me because I know a lot of people who do fall asleep to ASMR.
Yeah.
They needed to fall asleep. And they they put on these channels that are like so long, and they have their favorite ASMR artist. And like, I need to fall asleep to stuff like this, but not ASMR particularly. But like, it is a very real experience, and it's creepy if you're not into it. But I also feel like it feels very intimate. Like, you are getting kind of a look into her sleeping ritual and and how she doesn't find comfort in like a parent or a person to fall asleep, but like a person who is being fake intimate with her and like soothing her to sleep. It's almost like a lullaby in a way.
Absolutely.
And it's sad because this is what she's looking to a stranger again on the internet.
Yeah.
Like a persona of a person to like give her the comfort that she needs and is looking for to fall asleep and to feel held and taken care of.
So, I mean, like you said, she's turning to a video for comfort instead of her father or her mother or a friend. Do you think that instills habits of seeking artificial comfort instead of quote-unquote real comfort? Oh,
100%. I think so. I think, especially for me, who found a lot of, like, friendships online as a kid, and you sometimes, like, can forget how to talk to people. And, like, I don't know. It's weird.
Like, when the pandemic started, like, I always said I was a huge extrovert, and I still consider myself an extrovert, but 2.5 years of, working from home and not going out to see people like every day like I used to, going back to work in the office, I was like, I feel like I've forgotten how to talk to people, and I've also like, I don't want to talk to people, not because I'm like, oh, the virus, but because I'm like, I've been living in my head for so long now. Which was such a foreign experience to me at first, that now I'm like, I don't even want to be around people. And I hate that about myself, but then I'm like, well, shit, like, what if I was 13 years old going through this?
Yeah. One of the things I think we need to be careful about is saying, oh, well, online is fake and then real life is real. Because I think for a whole generation of people, that isn't their real experience. Like, I'm thinking for 13-year-old kids who, as you said, Trace, have grown up with smartphones and iPads and so on, I think this is actually just their reality. So the online, like, seeking help from people to sleep or make social connections, like, I actually think that that's just a lived experience for an entire generation of people. It's not fake anymore.
Well, and like, look at TikTok and the authenticity people are, or like, it looks like authenticity on the app, and how people are more likely to share more intimate views of themselves on apps like that. And like, well,
and we've all done it on Twitter. I mean, again, you can go on Twitter and look at anyone going in like, and you're right, I'm not trying to demonize the internet. I mean, again, all of us are on it. I use it every single day. And actually, yeah, most of my closest friendships are with people I haven't even met in person.
Mhm.
Yup. It's
Which is
very
not to say
bizarre.
that they're not damaging or that they're not dangerous. It's just like that's where some of the fun of having this conversation comes into play, right? Is like we can't demonize the thing that we use literally all day, every day. And yet we can also implicitly recognize this shit is fucking us up.
Well, because, I mean, okay, like, just to simplify it, you know, like, Joe, you and I really only talk on the podcast, right? But we
Mhm.
message each other, like, on Twitter messages or texting all the time,
All the
every
time.
day. Not all the time, but
Mhm.
but it's like, wouldn't you rather have someone text you than phone call you?
Oh my God, don't even.
Yeah,
like, I will
Jesus
decline
Christ.
the call.
But that's
You
the
know,
thing,
call
right?
me.
It's like, okay, but
Yeah, it's more immediate and it's more real.
well, I don't want to say it's a problem, but it's like you're immediately cutting down on quote unquote, yeah, real social interaction, which again is a phone call is less real than in person, but like, you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's that spectrum, baby.
Mhm.
I mean, I think the thing that I like about online interactions is that I have the capacity to walk away. So
Yeah.
it's not that I live in my head too much, which I do, but also that if I don't want to answer your text or if I don't want to message you, I don't have to. Whereas if we're in person, like the number of times that I've had interactions with people over brunch or we go over dinner or something like that, and it's like, okay, everybody fucking turn your phone over because we are trying to have a human interaction. And it's hard and painful and taxing. And I think that's some of the mental fatigue you're talking about, Trace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I should note that at this point in the plot synopsis, we are 30 minutes in. So this is traditionally considered the end of the first act. So we fade to black, and then when Casey wakes up, the video has transitioned to a message for Casey from JLB. So literally 30 minutes in, almost to the minute, we then transition into the next act and we introduce the second main character.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an ominous laughing soundtrack as a picture of her face decays. This is literally the introduction that JLB sends to her to catch her attention, and it's intercut with the words, "You're in trouble, and I need to talk to you."
Yeah. So I want to do this before the call because I feel like that call is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of pulled from Schoenbrun's youth, basically. So she continues to say, when I was 13 years old, I was obsessed with the Wes Craven movie Scream. It got in my little brain. I posted on the Scream message board. A big part of the message board was people making up their own stories based on that movie.
Fan fiction.
Yeah, fan fiction.
Hey.
People posting their own movie ideas, writing amateur screenplays, short stories, basically a proto version of what you see and We're All Going to the World's Fair.
Right.
She would also post about serial killers and vampires.
Yeah. Honestly, fucking relatable content.
Yeah,
Yes.
Jesus Christ.
I was a morbid, creative kid, still decades away from accepting my trans identity, and for me, the anonymity of this forum was a refuge. Even though the tones of my stories were pretty dark, writing and posting them was a balm. Enter WAJ. So, a 30-something man who posted under the acronym WAJ started commenting on my stories. He kind of browbeated me into a relationship over AOL Instant Messages.
Oh, God.
He was really emotionally needy, and I was this 13-year-old kid who knew I shouldn't be talking to this guy, but he would IM me whenever I signed on. He'd tell me about how depressed he was and tell me about his drug addict boyfriend. It was this relationship that I was really trying to extricate myself from. Here's where it gets a little creepy.
Oh, good.
sorry.
We're not there yet.
More creepy. So, one night, he told me he had just found out this secret, and the secret was that vampires were real. He had recently drunk his boyfriend's blood, and he was
Oh.
becoming a vampire himself.
Oh, God.
He told me that he could feel the changes starting, that he was afraid of what he was becoming, but that it also felt good. He was implying that he wanted to share this secret world with me. I knew then that it wasn't real, but I was sort of intrigued and fascinated by it. I didn't know if he believed it, if it was something that he was telling me to lure me deeper into a relationship, or if it was just his version of harmless fantasy play. Again, with a 13-year-old child.
Mm-hmm.
It was an incident that stuck with me as a young person who was also trying to figure out their own relationship with their body, intimacy, fiction, and reality, using the internet as a way to do that. I remember sitting in math class the next day playing this over in my head. I knew that W.A.J.'s story wasn't true, but part of me sort of wished that it was. I thought, wouldn't the world be a more exciting place if this sort of transformation were possible? That was the initial emotional inspiration for the film. This film is not an adaptation of that story, but it uses that as a jumping off point. So I'd say that the origin story of sorts that I shared provided more of an emotional context for a lot of the themes I wanted to explore, rather than a narrative basis for the film. I think the film is really sensitive to and concerned with power dynamics in storytelling, and power dynamics in a space where anyone can control the narrative of a story. That's what I was pulling from.
Yeah.
Did she disclose how old she was to the guy?
She doesn't say if she disclosed that to him, no.
Okay. Not that it matters. I was just curious.
No.
I was just curious if he knew, or if it was one of those things where like no one shared their age, so it was like weird and nebulous.
Well, because the difference is going to be, right, because Schoenbrun is not going to be able to, well, maybe not, posting videos at this time, because I feel like this is like late 90s.
Well, but even
Yeah.
I would argue, I mean, I have met some very smart preteens, teenagers, kids, right?
Mm.
I would argue that as an adult, I am still able to distinguish the writing and the speaking tone of an
Yes.
adult over a child.
Oh, 100%. I agree with that. I was just curious if it was one of those things where, like, you know, sometimes you don't tell the full truth on the internet.
Oh,
and that,
100%.
again,
Yeah.
does not mean that he should have done that. But
Mhm.
you can still tell, you can definitely tell when someone is actually a teenager.
Well, but I'm just differentiating it from this film, though, because with JLB and Casey, like, he can see that she is a 13-year-old girl.
Oh,
Yes.
exactly.
Whereas we don't know what the case was with Jane Schoenbrun.
Did you guys ever have personas online? Like, you pretended to be different people, or like a different age or something? Did you ever do that?
No, because I find that takes so much brain energy to like build.
Yeah.
Trace is like, I don't build a character. Sorry.
No, I'm not the creative type. So I mean, like you have those
Sorry.
you have those video games that like Persona 5 or really any RPG where it's you're building a character and the game is essentially a life simulator. And some people really enjoy that because you're escaping into a fantasy world. Whereas for me, I'm like, who has the time to
Wow.
build a new life? I'm too busy with the one that I have. And that is not me coming down on people that like these games. I wish I was more invested in them. But honestly, like I got 3 hours into Persona 5 and I was like, ooh, this is too much of a commitment. He says as he spends 200 hours in a Pokemon game.
Right.
That's like the same. Never mind.
I
That's a different podcast.
But I'm not building a life in a Pokemon game. I'm just
Right.
going from A to B and catching monsters.
Fair.
So, Mary Beth, I'm gauging that you did.
I did. So, okay, I definitely catfish, but like not not to the point that like I was in relationships. Like it was always this thing where like I would go into chat rooms and I would pretend to be older than I was and look
Mhm.
different to like flirt with boys and flirt with guys. So like but like the conversations wouldn't last very long because I would chicken out a little bit because it was scary to pretend to be somebody I wasn't, but it was really exciting too because I
Right.
could be whoever I wanted. Like I could say like, oh yeah, I'm 16 and blonde, like because that's what guys liked when I was like 13. And I had a friend who did this, but more than me, and she would actually catfish guys and like get into relationships with them and like talk to them on like video.
Oh, gosh.
With video off and stuff. So like she introduced me to that entire world and it was fascinating to like make myself out to be someone different. And we would do it together too. Like it was weird. But like that was something I really kind of experimented with in
Mhm.
terms of being someone different and like seeing how you can manipulate people. Like that's pretty fucked up. Like a teenager
Mhm.
should not be able to do that. But I did, and I had like secret screen names for when I would talk to people who I didn't know in real life. Like I had like my forward facing screen name on AIM, and I had my
Mhm.
secret ones for talking to all of my like secret friends.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
for me, it's just too many things. Like even like something like The Sims, where like people enjoy doing The Sims. So you're building a life, and I'm just like, it's too much to keep track of for me, and so I find it not fun. Where someone else would be like, oh my god, I am exercising these creative parts of my brain, even if it's or something like what you're doing, Mary Beth, with creating an online persona.
Yeah.
It's somewhere between a prank and a power play, right?
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. And like I also then had like a writer persona online when I was writing fan fiction.
Right.
Like I wrote under the name
of the character from The Village. Like, I was so weird. I was so weird. But, like, I loved it because, like, it was my persona. And, like, people liked my weird writing about Harry Potter. And, like, it was so cool to have, like, a secret life where people didn't actually know who I was.
Well, but I guess that's where I'm coming in, too. Because so for that, why did you use a pen name for that?
Because I liked having that kind of anonymity and being someone different and, like, being able to be creative in a way that I didn't feel was acceptable in my everyday life, and being able to share a side of myself that I didn't want to share with people I knew, and that I was kind of embarrassed to share with people I knew because it was like super exposing how nerdy I was, and like, but I also again like to disconnect from my reality and be a different person because like I had a weird childhood, so it was really cool at the same time to disconnect from that and be someone else for a little bit. Like I love doing that.
See, and I'm the opposite, where I'm like, well, if I'm writing something, if I'm creating, like, again, I'm writing a story, I want people to know it's me. I don't want people to, like, attribute it to this fake name.
Yeah, well, I do not want people knowing I'm writing about Harry Potter fan fiction, and like, that I don't need people to know.
I feel like you're talking about being driven by different needs, right? Like, Trace, you're very...
narcissistic.
I was going to say you're driven by the need to get recognized for the things that you feel proud of. And I think with Mary Beth, she's talking more about like, it's something that you enjoyed, but that you also needed to compartmentalize. You didn't want different parts of your life to intersect, so you had to keep them separate.
Yeah, I get that.
Yep.
I mean, I didn't do it, but I get it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so all this to say, Casey is having a video chat with this creepy dude, and she's on camera, and he is not.
Red flag number 1.
The old my camera's broken trick.
Oh boy.
Fucking shit. Sorry, it just it's a creep when that happens.
Well, but in this movie, hey, he's not, right? He is?
Well, here's the thing. One of the things
Interesting. You ask that question.
I think the default position is that, yes, he is a creepy dude who is going after a young girl because he can see her. He knows what she looks like. She cannot see him. He is not being entirely candid with her. But at the same time, all of their conversations are game oriented, right? Like he repeatedly talks about like he doesn't want to know about her personal life. He just wants her to keep making videos so that he knows that she's okay, because the game is for serious people, but also her videos are becoming increasingly intense, so he wants to make sure that she's doing okay. And I love this really thin line that we are walking, where it could be super fucking creepy and predatory, or it could be this dude is just so invested in this game and he has found somebody that he thinks he can connect with.
Well, and for all we know, he's just watching her videos later and jerking off to them.
Well, there is maybe that possibility too.
Yes.
But I ended this movie not thinking he was a creep, but maybe we can talk about that more as we...
Yeah, I definitely think he's a creep.
No, I think so too.
Okay. See, maybe it's my naivete.
There is an inherent power dynamic, no matter how much he wants to be like, it's just the game. There is an inherent power dynamic between an older man and a 13-year-old girl on the internet. And like... It's just, there's already a power dynamic, even if no one thinks there is. And it's just very slippery and very gross.
Okay, and I'm not trying to, like, prove either one of you wrong here, but I'm trying to think. Like, is it the inclusion of the internet here that makes it more creepy, or is it just the fact, quote-unquote, just the fact, that it's an older man with a younger girl? Because I'm trying to think of another movie in which a older man befriends a younger girl, and it's like a happy, like, one of those fun feel-good movies.
Those don't exist, because you're thinking of stuff like Hard Candy.
Well, okay, no.
We are the professional.
You're telling me there has never been like a Disney movie where an older man has befriended a young child and they go off and have adventures together?
Yeah, okay.
There is no way that it's hard not to have a power dynamic there, though.
I'm sorry, what do you think of Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins?
Creepy.
Weird.
I mean, again, I'm not trying to prove
but
you wrong.
But I also see him equal ages to her. Oh, we're talking about the kids?
The kid.
Okay, that's fucking creepy. Your fucking chimney sweet's coming to hang out with your children and sing them songs? Get the fuck away from me.
Taking
Weirdo
Mary
with
Poppins
your giant white teeth. Jesus Christ. Sorry.
Oh my god. Let me just try this really quick. Movies where old man befriends young girl.
Watch list material
Watch
here.
list. FBI.
Well, you are in luck because a lot of these lists are definitely. We've got Poison Ivy,
Oh god.
Oh my god.
The Crush.
Lolita, The Crush, Entrapment. Oh my, because of Sean Connery and Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Oh my god, that is not
So,
a
like,
young
there
woman.
There is in the Florida Project, kind
Right.
of, but it's more of a fatherly figure. I feel
Yeah,
like
I think that's the distinction.
Yeah.
Like, Trace, your example of Disney is very much like, oh, we have father figures because usually we kill off a dad or we kill off like a mentor. So it makes sense there because it's really about like getting the child through adolescence and into like a coming of age maturity. Because this film, even though some people will quibble and say, oh, it's not really horror, but just by sheer virtue of it having this ominous kind of creepy tone, people will immediately read this as, power dynamic. Ooh, it's uncomfortable. This dude's shady.
And bear in mind, I was like, this guy is a creep for the entire movie until the ending.
well, and like I have sympathy for him though. You know what? I do have sympathy for this character because like he's a creep who I don't think always knows he's a creep.
Right.
And I know that sounds like a hard thing to like parse, but it's like I think he does have what he believes to be innocent intentions at first.
Well, that and we don't have to go into this, but that is entirely another conversation too about pedophiles and sex offenders and the mental illnesses that they have. And I find them very fascinating conversations. I don't think we need to go into it here, but I think those are very interesting and conversations that should be happening as opposed to just writing off like pedophile, like go die, which... Sorry, I'm going to stop there. Just continue.
I would say we had a really good stab at that conversation back on the X-Files episode. So before Trace gets uber wasted, we had a fairly healthy conversation about it.
There you go. Go listen to that.
But like there is also this thing of wanting to again like finding connection and feeling like there isn't as much taboo on the internet about those connections. Like feels like again like the boundary's thin and taboo doesn't exist as much.
I think we would also feel differently if she was an avatar and he was an avatar, because I'm thinking like, oh, we probably all had conversations with preteens on the internet and maybe not even realized it because they don't have a picture and they just like message us and we respond and suddenly we have conversations and then we don't know that those people aren't of age, but because he can see her and he knows that, I think that's what tips it over the line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because like that having his image up always also makes it feel like he knows that there's something a little bit weird about this and like there's something slippery.
I thought where the movie was going to be going from here on forward was a hard candy type situation, although albeit like with the power dynamic reversed, because in Hard Candy, Elliot Page is never out of power.
This is true.
Yeah.
And Casey is not without power. Like, she always has a certain amount of agency, and I'm interested to talk about the sort of dramatic confrontation that they had that precedes the final bit of the film, because I think we get some interesting revelations about how Casey has approached all of these interactions as well.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and also just like, this also goes to show you that people, I think, underestimate kids.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And like, we're talking about like kids on the internet, but like kids are smart. They know what they're doing. Like again, like we'll talk about it. They a lot of the time they do kind of have they have more of a concept of what they're doing than a lot of people give them credit for.
Well, it's because
like,
they're exposed.
They're not manipulated. Yeah, like they can't be as easily manipulated as I think a lot of people thought at the beginning of the internet. Like, oh, kids are unsafe, but like I knew what I was doing on the internet. I was the shit lord. Like I was also manipulating. Like I was a shit stirrer. Like I was the one like manipulating people, and like kids know how to do that shit early. So like. It's like, oh, yeah, there's a lot of creepy people on the internet, but there's also a lot of kids fucking around and, like, playing with people's heads.
Oh, sure. It's a different kind of playground, right?
Well, yeah. And, like, younger kids than me have the upper hand. It's just fucking insane.
So all this to say, they end up having a conversation about her symptoms. He wants to make sure that she's not faking it. He makes her promise that she isn't. And then, she talks about how she's not good at talking to other people. But then she kind of sidesteps that so that she can talk about her symptoms instead. But we end by saying, okay, she's going to keep making videos about her symptoms and that she feels different. So it's like, okay, cool. And then the film switches. So we've really been following Casey. We haven't seen what JLB looks like. And then when they hang up this call, suddenly we are in JLB's house and we get to see what he looks like. And he is played by Michael J. Rogers, who is a bit of a character actor. Like when you see him, he's got a face that you recognize, even if you can't quite place the films he's been in. And he's very much just a middle-aged white dude. He lives in a middle-class house, and he spends his times the exact same way as Casey, laying around, watching World's Fair videos.
I actually find that fascinating, though, right? I didn't even think about that, but, like, yeah, we're looking at two different generations living on the internet. Yeah, he was very much like a Bobo Jackie Earle Haley to me.
Okay.
Yes. Exactly. Oh, that is exactly how I feel too. Very Jackie Earle Haley.
Which is funny because the two things I know Jackie Earle Haley from, well, besides Nightmare on Elm Street, are Watchmen and Little Children, in which she plays.
Oh, yes,
Right.
Little Children,
Not
where
so
he
good.
plays a pedophile.
I mean, it's a type, right?
Yeah.
Ugh, rip. That's terrible. I hope I never.
Oh, I guess he's a pedophile in Nightmare on Elm Street, too.
Yes, yeah. Especially in that version.
Yeah. Yes, he is a pedophile in that movie.
Previous episode, go back and listen to it.
Go listen
we
to it.
had issues.
With that movie, how dare you? Just kidding.
So I'm interested to get your read on this because one of the videos that we see him watching is a teen boy that Casey had been watching. It's the kid in the bathroom. And we actually get to watch this video for longer. And the boy has like a kind of body horror reaction. Like he's got mold on his arm and then he digs around into it and then he pulls out tickets to an actual fairgrounds out of this gaping wound.
I didn't know what to make of this. This was I thought, cool, this is where the movie is going, but then we don't really go back to this body horror aspect.
Mary Beth, any thoughts?
So I see it as people taking on the trend and making a joke out of it. You know, that's how I interpret it. And but they portray it in such a way that it doesn't necessarily feel like a joke. You can't tell. You know, like fake paranormal activity videos, like, which is like less of an extreme, but like to convince people that these are real for views and to tap in on like a thing that's really popular, but they're just doing it to shock and to get people talking. And that's kind of how I saw it. And then I saw it as like one of those things where people like JLB who believes in this stuff would be like, it's real, it's happening.
Right.
Well, but I guess that's the point. I'll bring in my final piece from Schoenbrun's interviews here because I guess that does make sense, Mary Beth. So Schoenbrun goes on to say, we're all going to the World's Fair as a film about fantasy and intimacy and identity play in the digital realm. It takes inspiration as much from traditional narrative form as it does from the scroll of a newsfeed, and it tries to speak authentically in the language of the internet. It works from the thesis of Poe's law, an adage that posits that it is impossible to know if someone is telling the truth or trolling you online. So that is this scene in a nutshell. I think there's this really destabilizing thing that we've gotten incredibly used to as consumers of culture. When we sit down to watch a feature film or linear TV shows, maybe we're staring at the screen, but maybe we're also glancing down at a phone, Wikipedia-ing facts, Googling something separate, or just idly checking Twitter. This barrage of media that's assaulting us at all times from all sorts of sources is so different from traditional narrative filmmaking. One of my goals in making the film was to sort of merge the two, to make something that existed on the canvas of a feature-length film, but was only trying to bring in influences from this everyday experience that we have of scrolling through this cacophony of media. I was also just being really honest and true to what is ambiguous about using the internet, which is that sometimes people just disappear without a trace, or sometimes you see a video and you have no idea what the intentions of the person who made it are. That was one of the guiding principles of the film. We, as viewers, would be in a similar place emotionally to if you had just stumbled upon these characters in videos online.
Right. Trace, you may not remember this. I feel like I brought it up once before, but Mary Beth, do you remember Lonely Girl?
No.
Oh, damn it. You two are useless to me.
Is it a movie? What is it?
It was a series of, like, web video, like, kind of confessionals like what Casey has, but it's the actress who would eventually go on to play Juliet in Grimm, that NBC show about, like, fairy tale creatures.
Really?
But basically, the whole thing was like, it was presented like video diaries, and she would post one every day, and it just started to seem like something weird was going on in her life. And over time, it was revealed that her boyfriend was actually an occultist, and the series ends with her seemingly abducted and maybe murdered.
Wait, okay. So this is the thing where it's like, we don't know if it's really, like, this is actually happening to her, but then, like...
100%. Yeah. People were like, oh, she's just a really interesting internet figure. Like, her channel's getting a lot of popularity. Weird stuff is happening. She keeps mentioning, like, people started to piece together clues in a kind of, like, lost red yarn mystery way. And then, yeah, it eventually came out that, of course, it was all fabricated. It had been scripted. She was a professional actress, but we didn't know about that until well into its run.
Oh, I love that shit so much. It's like such the evolution of found footage into this like weird new way of telling stories over like a year. And you find out it's fake and it's fucking cool. It's happening on TikTok a lot too.
Right? Like it's the new way of catfishing people.
It's like such cool storytelling.
I've never heard of this. It is 3 seasons and 547 episodes. But here's the thing. Launched 16 months after the YouTube video platform went online. So that is why I did not know what this is.
Oh, yeah. It's not new.
Yeah.
But it was very much one of those things where I think at the beginning of the recording, Mary Beth, you said it's like there's certain things that are going to resonate more closely to people from different generations or different ages because of like how you've engaged or grown up with things like online media. And that digital literacy, like some of us have had to have a really hard crash course. And most of us, unfortunately, do a really shit job of it because that's why we keep falling for dumb stuff like fake news. But really, at the end of the day, like, there's so much content, but also so much of that is either not real or it's coming from a disingenuous place where people are actively looking to fuck with us.
Yeah. Well, that's this movie. We don't know a lot of this stuff in this movie.
Yeah. So all this to say, we fairly clearly do understand that JLB is buying into this like wholesale. He's on board with all of these World Fair videos, and they eat up a lot of his time. I do want to note that he is always seen by himself in his house, except for one scene where he is watching something on the living room couch. We can see that there's a person down at the end of the hallway, and it looks like they're either moving a bag or they're like just bringing in groceries, but you can't tell if it's a man, if it's a woman, if they're coming, if they're going, what the relationship is. It's never unpacked, but clearly this man is doing well because he has this big house, but we never see him working. So I love that. Really, at the end of the day, we don't know anything about Casey, and we don't know anything about JLB.
Yeah. It's, again, it's just all very unsettling.
Okay, so we get a fun kind of like montage of things, kind of like what you read from Schoenbrun's statement, Trace, where it's like, this is what the experience of being online is like. So we have an 8-bit game from 1994 that requires you to retype, I want to go to the World's Fair, in order to advance down like a really shitty looking road towards the World's Fair. We have episode 8 of a generic-looking horror show called Dark Signal. The episode is called Curse of Karum, and it ends with a kid getting sucked into his laptop, Ring style. We also have a silent show called Demon Wings, which features a woman with wings who is played by filmmaker May Leitz, a.k.a. Nick Spheres, on YouTube, and she's just sitting there on a couch.
Okay, I was really not confused by this, but I was very much like what are we watching here?
Yeah, and it just kind of feels like different types of curated content that has maybe either informed the gameplay or just simulates, here's the barrage of media available to you online.
Yeah.
So we see JLB sketching and watching Casey's feed. He's deconstructing a video of her sleeping. So he's already watched 6 hours of it, but he zeroes in on a moment where she seems to be still asleep, but she leans over in her bed and we see a freeze frame of her grimacing like she's in pain of some kind. And he ends up likening this in a later conversation with her to possession in a paranormal activity movie, which I thought was just like, oh, cool. We're acknowledging that these are real world events because the paranormal activity movies exist in this world.
Well, but it's also showing that he watched her earlier video because she mentioned paranormal activity in her video in the forest.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So he's clearly watching everything of hers. And again, is it because he's a creepy perv, or is he like genuinely into the game and concerned for her safety, or both?
Yeah. And the answer is yes.
But like, and it's also like one of those people that sit there and go frame by frame through like ghost videos. Like, oh, it's not an orb, it's a face. Like, it's like that kind of obsessive thing where the internet lets you obsess over things and like gives you a place to talk about these obsessions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it feeds into the idea that there's merit to spending all of that time looking for clues and figuring things out, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So he encourages her to keep making videos so that he knows that she's okay. So then we see this series of videos, presumably from her feed. And I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to focus on the one that's kind of important, which is Dumbass Waterfalls. And it contains an ominous voiceover where Casey says, "Someday soon, I'm just going to disappear and you'll have no idea what happened to me."
Yeah. All of this is very weird because again, we also don't really know how much Casey is being real here or how much she's putting on for show for views. I mean, again, the first one where she's like at the cemetery and she's like, "Oh, here we are at my high school," and it's like, "Here's the cafeteria," and it's like a gravestone. Ugh.
Yeah, like she's clearly being funny. This is a bit more personality than we've seen in some of her videos. The other one of note is Losing Control of Myself, which is also the top rated of these videos with 52 views. And this is where she does the Love in the Winter song with marshmallows. And then randomly at one point, she just starts screaming and then she kind of freezes. And then she starts doing the dance again as though she has either been possessed or she's like, wouldn't this be a cool thing if I insert this so that it gains more attention?
Yeah, and to me, this is just her exercising her demons. Like, you know, metaphorical demons.
Like getting it out.
Wait, did you guys ever have YouTube channels?
No.
I mean, we have one now, but it's for the podcast.
Oh, yeah, right, we have one.
I also had a YouTube channel where I did vlogs. And no, it's hidden. You can never fucking see it. But I did that with my friends.
What's your pen name? What pen name is it under?
This one was actually under my real name.
Oh my god, you sneaky slut.
I know. God. I was a junior in high school when I started doing it, so I was a little bit more open to the idea of being a YouTuber. They're terrible. Bullshit, terrible videos. But like you would do shit like that, like do the dancing shit and then scream and be like, it's normal. Like fucking teenagers are weird. Or it's scary. I don't know. It's one of those things where you're like, am I possessed or am I just screaming because I want to scream?
You know, I was, and not to be like, well, I didn't scream. I was like, I don't think I've ever screamed, but I totally have. But it was more so because, this is really embarrassing. I was a late bloomer with puberty, and so my voice didn't deepen until I was probably like in high school. But I would frequently scream when I was home alone, so I could see if my voice sounded like a woman's scream or a man's scream, so I could try to change it if I ever needed to scream at school.
Wow.
I know.
That is some gay hate, Trace. Holy cow.
I was trying to change something about myself, which luckily it worked out. I got a deeper voice. Not that there's anything wrong with the feminine voice.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I love the ambiguity of this kind of activity because in some ways, yeah, it absolutely feels like a 13-year-old just blowing off steam. Like having a private dance party, I fucking do that shit every time my husband leaves. I'm like, oh, I can just be free to be me, play music, dance around, look like a fucking idiot. I don't tend to scream during that time, but yeah, I mean, this could be construed as normal. But if you think about JLB watching Casey's video, he would 100% be like, oh my God, something's inside of her. Something is wrong with her. Like, what is going on with her? So just the different ways that you could read it are fascinating.
It's the film is full of uncertainty.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we see several shots of JLB's day. He's watching more videos. I do love the one of him watching videos while he's on the toilet because, again, relatable content, right? He does record a message to her expressing concern and saying that he wants to talk to her soon. And this apparently is kind of like where she starts to get frustrated with him, because one video that we see is her doing a tarot card reading, and she's basically calling him out for being controlling and fearful and a bunch of other not very flattering things. She never actually names him, but it's very, very clear that she is speaking directly to JLB.
Yeah, she tells him that he has anxiety, he's lonely and fearful, so he must not be super strong or powerful.
Oof.
And, like, I love that, though, because it shows that, like, if there is a manipulation factor here, like, she is not falling for it. Like, you think I'm an easily manipulated 13-year-old girl on the internet, but actually, like, fuck you. I know what you're doing. And it's like this, we talked about this previously, but this moment of reclaiming agency of, like, I'm not someone you can just pull, like, the wool over my eyes. Like, I see you for what you are. And I want to be your friend, but you're crossing a boundary and it's incredible to see that with, like, a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does start to take on a bit of a dangerous angle when the next video that we see is shot on New Year's Eve, and it looks fairly innocuous. Like, the imagery, it's her holding the camera, so we're not actually seeing Casey, but she's walking the streets. We see these Christmas lights, and she ends up on a kind of crowded downtown-ish street where people are ready to count down the ball drop. But her voiceover is actually talking about how she's thinking of shooting JLB in the stomach 3 times or killing herself.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, there's a good contrast going on between what we're seeing and what we're hearing right now.
Yeah, well, and this is, because we're about to get to the scene where she destroys Poe, right?
Yes, correct.
This scene, okay, did y'all have something like Poe?
Yeah, she's sitting right next to me.
Yeah.
What is it, Mary Beth?
The creepy baby doll I posted on Twitter the other day.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh, okay, well, I had a blankie, like every normal person, and... I slept with this blankie in my bed until I left for college.
Okay.
I remember being turning 9, and my dad stopped me in the kitchen and was like, it might be time to, like, stop sleeping with your blankie because you're 9. You're a big boy now, which hate that phrase, big boy. But I didn't. I refused to do it. It was such a comfort thing for me. And actually, I don't know where it is. I think it's like in a box somewhere from when I went to college. But like I didn't like cradle the thing. I just had it in my bed with me all the way through high school. And I don't know, it was just always a thing that always comforted me when I was asleep. And so watching her destroy Poe like this is the one time where I was like, oh, I don't think this is her doing this. Because me personally, I would never have destroyed my blankie. Ever. So, but then again, is she just rebelling because she's, going through a phase? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is where we get some of the poster art from. So she paints her face and we see it glowing green in the black lights. And then, yeah, she just absolutely goes to town on this stuffed lemur. And then she exits the frame. But when she comes back in, it's like she was in a fugue state because she almost doesn't recognize what she's done. Yeah. Like, she looks at Poe as though she's seeing the destruction for the first time, and she's really upset. So you're kind of like, wait, was she possessed? What happened here? And then, importantly, this is when we start to push in on this flickering blue monitor, and Casey intones that she knows how it's going to end. She's going inside the video through the computer and inside the screen. So the reason I say that this is important is because I have seen some critics compare these scenes to Cronenberg's Videodrome, which features people disappearing into pirate signals in their TVs, as well as something like Mulholland Drive, which has a very important, like, blue moment, as we talked about in our previous episode.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. At this point, I mean, even watching the film a second time, it's not that I'm lost with what the film is doing, but I'm just very much like, I guess I'm just going on for whatever ride this film is taking me on because I don't know what's going on.
Well, and like, especially with the destruction of Poe, I at first was like, okay, there's something supernatural going on here. But then I think about when you get in those kind of dissociative fugue states and you're so angry. I experienced that as a kid, where I didn't destroy things, but, like, I would lose myself for a bit. And it's almost like it's that weird slippery slope between, like, mental illness and is this really happening? And I don't think there's necessarily an easy answer in there, but because this movie, I think, just depicts the experience of dysphoria in such a way where you feel disconnected from your own emotions, and you do these destructive things because you're not sure what to do with all of these feelings, and then you wake up and you're like, oh my god, what the fuck?
Right. Yeah, like you're so in the feels in the moment, and then afterwards you realize, oh, I almost can't even relate to who that person was, and I now have some deep regrets.
Well, and also, like, when I was a kid thinking I was, like, an actual monster, like, you would convince yourself of things. So if she's wanting enough to convince herself that she's possessed, I mean, she could have been in that state, too, you know what I mean? Like, she could have, like, convinced herself, oh, I am going through something, but it's more, like, in her head.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to say because there was another video hidden in amongst there where she sets it up and then she goes out of frame again. And then when she comes back in, she's kind of crawling around on her hands and feet and she's making kind of like snarly noises and talking weird. And you're just like, there is a performative nature to this, but it also does feel like, yeah, she's channeling something or she's getting something out, or maybe she isn't fully in control of what she's doing.
We'll never know.
Yeah, it's the ambiguity of it all. Okay, so she has a Skype conversation with JLB. He's very disturbed by her recent videos, and this is where we're really starting to get to the heart of this relationship. So she asks how long she has until she'll do it, and I feel like the natural inclination is to read, she's talking about suicide. And then he kind of reminds her or tells her, like, hey, we're actually just playing a game. It's a massive multiplayer role-playing game, and your videos have gotten too intense. Like, have you remembered that this is all just make-believe? Which is a fairly big statement coming from him because he is literally spending all of his time watching these fucking videos.
Well, and that's where, too, though, the fact that we don't see what her outside life is like again, with her family, with her friends, if she has any friends.
Does she even go to school?
Yeah. And that's why I could think, like, maybe this might be jarring for someone because we're not seeing that. But again, that's the point with Schoenbrun's, what she chooses to do with the POV of this film. But, yeah. Oof.
Yeah, so Casey goes on, she almost gets angry about this, or she gets frustrated with him, and she demands to know if he thought that she was going to kill herself or someone else, which is kind of ironic because she did say that in those New Year's video, right?
Yeah.
So she gets upset to the point where she's kind of softly crying, and he mentions that he considered calling the police. And then she gets mad. She insists that the videos are pretend and that Casey isn't even her name, which I don't know about you two, but the first time I saw this, it threw me for a loop because I realized, oh, I default just assumed her name was Casey. And I realized, oh, she could have been faking this whole fucking time. That really may not be her name.
Well, and okay, I'm not saying this is the thing, but what if it was like she was the liar the whole time? I mean, not just about her name, but about everything. And she was playing this old man.
Oh, absolutely. It could be that. Like,
page out of my book.
Yeah, this could be a Mary Beth catfishing kind of thing. I assumed a different personality because I wanted to lure people in and fuck with them. So she ends up hanging up on this video call, and then she messages him immediately thereafter saying, don't call her again. And then she ends it by calling him a pedophile.
Yeah.
So,
and
okay.
I don't think we see Casey again for the rest of this movie, do we?
We see her distorted face, but we don't see her interacting or posting any other videos. So we're still following JLB. He basically is very upset. He wanders around his house. He almost doesn't seem to know what to do with himself. And then he decides, okay, he's going to try her again. He tries to call her on Skype multiple times. We hear her. We don't really see it. And then at the end, we see him messaging her, just don't do it. Please keep making videos. It's like he's an addict, but also a concerned parent and also a pedophile who doesn't want to lose the person they're obsessed with.
And I don't think he knows what he is either.
No.
I think the relationship spiraled to a point where he doesn't know even what the fuck he's doing. Well, she was like, I think I'm in too deep.
Yeah, like I've gone too far
and
now.
That's hard to do, though. Like, if you talk to someone like that for a long time, it's hard to say no, because they can bother the shit out of you. Like, they can really, like, get in your shit. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, we also don't know how much time has passed. Like, the New Year's video is telling because we get a sense, okay, like, now we know compared to when the first video was made. This whole film feels like it could just be taking place in a liminal state. Like, I don't really know what's real at this point.
Right.
So we fade to black and we see Casey's distorted face. I do like the way that this is shot because it kind of looks like a digital pixelation, like we're watching this on an old VHS copy that has gone through a lot of wear and tear. There's flickering neon light across her face. It's just it's very haunting and a little bit surreal. And then we hear this upbeat electronica music, and once again, the audio from the Dumbass Waterfalls video plays. I swear someday I'm just going to disappear, and you won't have any idea what happened to me. And it's like, okay, we're not seeing Casey again after this. Is this for us? Is this for JLB? Did she just stop making videos because she realized she had gotten in too deep? Does she die by suicide? Like, question mark, question mark, question mark.
Right.
Okay, so now we're up to the final scene. So in voiceover, JLB explains that Casey reached out a year later to apologize. She had been in assisted care, and she only now feels comfortable writing. So he records a message, and they meet in person. They have an awkward conversation. She apologizes for what she said. She says she made it to the heart of the fair, but something drew her back, as though she's insinuating it was him. And
so are we I know that she's talking about like the game, but are we also kind of insinuating that going to the fair is suicide? So she was like that close to pulling the metaphorical trigger. Mm-hmm. And then like what her memory of him stopped her from doing it.
Yes, and so is like, oh yeah, we had this connection because you were so close to that edge, and the thing that prevented you wasn't just me, it was me having my hand on the screen all night long, kind of like willing you to stay and stick around. And then he elaborates, like, at this point in their meetup, their physical meetup that he claims they ate some cheap pizza, they go back to the subway, and then they go their separate ways. And then there's this very long silent pause, and the movie fades to black. And that's how the movie ends. And I would like to hear how both of you interpret this final scene.
Well, now that y'all are like, after this whole conversation, I'm like, well, shit, did he murder her? And then this is like what we are left with?
Okay, so that's literally what I thought happened the first time I saw this. I was like, he fucking killed her, and then he created this elaborate fantasy narrative in his mind where they had a happy reconciliation. And the second time around, I think that he has just fabricated this and that he never heard from her again. In his need for closure and to paint himself as something other than a bad dude, he crafts this like, no, we got back together and it was okay and I saved her. So he repaints himself as the good guy, which is the same way that we often see people do when they get called out for their bullshit online, right? Like, they reframe that narrative like, no, I'm a good person, actually.
Yeah, and I actually had this weird interpretation that like he found her and saw her from afar and like cornered her, and then they had a really awkward interaction, and he fabricated it as like it was great, and in reality she was like, what the fuck? So that I cannot for the life of me tell you why I had that vibe, but like it gave me that vibe of someone who imagined a very positive interaction that was actually very negative.
But you actually believe that he did interact with her again?
I do believe he interacted with her.
Is there any world in which y'all believe what he is saying?
Like the way that he is recounting it?
Yeah. Hmm?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think because this movie is so wrapped up in like the idea of truth telling, I just can't. There's no way I'd ever be convinced.
So this will speak to my gullibility, because literally I watch this and I'm like, all right, cool. I'm taking that at face value. Okay. Movie's over.
You were like, okay, nice. We don't see Casey's side of the story, but I guess I'll trust JLB.
Yeah, there you go. But obviously, I'm opening up my mind to other possibilities now because of this conversation.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because the way that we've been talking about JLB, probably, if people haven't seen this movie, they probably have a very certain idea of what he looks like or how he acts. And you're probably wrong, because he's actually not nefarious. He's not ominous. He doesn't look like a villain. He's not twirling a mustache. Like, he's actually a very just kind of plain everyday sort of guy.
Mhm.
But that's also exactly what I imagine when I think of a serial killer.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Call it the optimist in me. But of course, when you have Schoenberg's backstory with her predator, then yeah, that would kind of track with JLB's characterization in this film.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that is We're All Going to the World's Fair. Do we have any final thoughts on this film, y'all?
I'm obsessed with this movie. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since I saw it. I think it's an incredibly complex, especially after this conversation, representation of like what the internet is and portrayal of yourself and truth telling and what we believe versus what we fall for and what we choose to believe versus what we question. And I think it's just such a film for our time in such an incredible way, and it's so fucking queer, and I love that a lot. I think it's doing so much in such a skillful way, and it obviously unlocked some weird ass memories of when I was a kid. So it did its job for me on a personal level.
There you go.
Yeah, I liked this. I don't love it. It's definitely a film that again, going into Schoenberg's her interviews and her director's statement, like, to me that added layers to the film that enriched my second viewing experience.
Right.
But then I'm a little conflicted about that because I'm kind of like, well, should I have to have that information to make more connections or open up more layers to a film? And I'm of two minds because it's like, well, like, then we're getting into intent. Should the work stand on its own? Should it not? Blah, 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 blah. I'm glad that I know these things about it, but then I'm left there wondering, well, but maybe should the film have done a better job of conveying that to me? Or maybe it does, and I just wasn't picking up on it as a viewer.
Yeah, I ended up treating this a bit like a David Lynch film or even a David Cronenberg film in the way that I didn't always need clear-cut answers because I was more invested in my kind of emotional response to the film. And I can definitely see a bunch of people watching this and feeling like, oh, it's not a horror film, or it's not horrific enough, or there isn't enough that happens. And I can totally appreciate why people would think that, but I feel like it's a movie that sits with you, and as I said, it's more about the emotional beats and kind of what it brings out in you as a viewer and thinking about how you do things online. Like, that to me is more powerful than the actual narrative of the film.
Right.
I agree with that 100%.
It is an experience more so than it is like a movie, but it is both.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, everyone. So before we announce what we're covering next week, Mary Beth, thank you for coming on to this because I feel like this was a treat to unpack.
It seriously was, so thank you so much for having me on to chat about it.
Of course. But let everyone know, where can they find you on social media?
So they can find me on Twitter at MB McAndrews. That's where they'll see all my work and all the weird things I talk about. Follow Dread Central at Dread Central. We have incredible articles we post every day written by me and some super incredible writers. So follow that. And you can also follow my podcast. You can follow at Scarred Podcast for Scarred for Life. And you can follow at Wona Podcast for Watch Once Never Again.
There you go.
Nice.
Well, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at Horror Queers, also Facebook. Join our Facebook Horror Queers group to hang out with other listeners. Go to our letterbox to keep track of all the films we've covered and see our ratings, and of course link to old episodes. We've got a YouTube channel where you can go listen to our interviews with filmmakers, queer filmmakers, or filmmakers of queer films. Our monthly Horror Queers hangouts where we discuss a wide range of topics with our peers. Mary Beth was actually on our one back in March where we discussed
Toxic fandom.
Yes.
If you have a moment, please rate and review us on your podcatcher of choice. And if you want even more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. We are now in May, everybody. So go subscribe to get episodes on horror movies that make us cry, the new controversial zombie film, The Sadness, the remake of Firestarter, Alex Garland's Men, and an audio commentary on 28 Weeks Later to commemorate its 15th anniversary.
Oh boy. Yep.
I know. That's a good movie, though. I love that movie.
Uh-huh.
Joe.
Yes.
What are we checking out next week? Oh, God. a fun one.
It could not be a harder left turn from what we have just talked about, which is like moody and addressing mental health issues and like online digital literacy and stuff. And just like, cool, so much like meat and existential shit. Yeah, next week, let's talk about a Friday the 13th film. So,
but one you have not seen before.
I don't think I've seen this one. We've talked about this before. They all just blend together. So it's entirely possible I've seen this a billion times or never. But we are going to be looking at part 6, which is Jason Lives.
The meta. The only reason why I'm like, you would remember is because it literally opens with a James Bond homage with Jason walking through an eyeball, slashing the screen, and blood drops.
I mean, sure. I feel like I've seen that, but I don't know if it's just a still or a clip.
Oh, man. Well, nevertheless, if you have seen or not, I'm so excited, y'all. This is the meta one. It's very tongue-in-cheek, and it's just, I mean, it's still a Friday the 13th film, so it's not going to, like, change the course of horror history, but it's really good.
Okay. Well, I'm excited.
As am I. But until next week, and until Friday the 13th, oh, man, fucking no, we can cross out we're all going to the World's Fair.
And cross out horror queers.
Atlas Avenue, a long stretch of road that encompasses everything the city of Kennett Heights has to offer. Neon lights, traffic, crime, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and the craziest of characters. My office was above it all. My name is James Locke, and I'm a PI.
Hello, Mr. J. How the hell you doing today?
Good, Edith. Nearly every year I have a new case. New people to meet, new clues to discover, and new problems to solve. But I do it the old-fashioned way. No technology. Nothing post-1950. Hell, I don't even listen to podcasts, but you should. Atlas Avenue Beat is a spoof of the film noir genre with goofy characters, tons of wordplay, and non-stop raunchy humor. There's also 3 whole seasons out right now with more on the way. Just search for Atlas Avenue Beat wherever you listen to podcasts or visit us online at bloody.fm.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.